All right, here we're continuing the idea of the Pythagorean theorem, except now we're looking at the converse. So let's take a look. So we're given a triangle with sides A, B, C. If we have that C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared, then this tells us that we in fact do have a right triangle. Okay, so when we talk about the converse, we're really trying to say, well, if we have a right triangle, then C squared equals A squared plus B squared. So the converse says, well, is backwards. If I go backwards, read that backwards. C squared equals A squared plus B squared. Does that imply that I have a right triangle? And in this case, the answer is yes, right? That is true. Now, what about if I don't have C squared equals A squared plus B squared? What if I have C squared is greater than A squared plus B squared, right? So I have the hypotenuse is greater than the sum of the sides. Well, if the hypotenuse is greater than the sum of the sides, then truly I have an obtuse triangle. And so an obtuse triangle is going to look like something like this, and where that angle is going to be greater than 90 degrees. Okay, and so can you imagine, so if I have C squared is less than the sum of the two sides, okay, then I would have an acute angle. Okay, and so that's where we have something like this, right? And so we can see that that angle is a lot smaller than a right triangle. Okay, so all right, so because of Pythagorean theorems, we also have these truths here. So always keep C on the left side to avoid confusion when classifying. So we're just going to classify a couple of these. Let's take a look here. So first, determine if the three sides lengths could form a triangle. Recall from earlier, the sum of the two smaller sides must be greater than the third sides. So this comes from the triangle inequalities, right? So if yes, we want to classify them as acute, right, or obtuse. Right? So we're going to take the two smaller sides. So I have 3 plus 7. Right? So my question is, how is that related to 9? Well, 3 plus 7, that's going to give me 10. Right? So is 10 larger than 9? Well, yes, this is true. Right? So if the two smaller sides are greater than the third side, this implies that I do have a triangle, which is great. So now let's check. So now if I do 3 squared plus 7 squared, how is that related to 9 squared? Okay. Well, 3 squared plus 7 squared, that's going to give us 9 plus 49, so it's going to give us a total of 58. So 58 is related to 81. How? Well, 81 is going to be greater, so our C squared is greater. So if our C squared is greater, that means that we have a obtuse angle. All right. Let's go ahead and try number 3 here. So we're going to take the two smaller sides. So I have 4 plus 11. We're just essentially going to check, is this a triangle or not, in 16. So if I take 4 plus 11, I should end up with 15. And then I have 16. How are these related? Well, these are related because 16 is going to be larger than 15, right? So when the two smaller sides, right, of our three-sided triangle, right, so our smaller sides, or I should really say the sum of our smaller sides, should be greater than our last side, or our largest side. And if this is true, then we have a triangle. If this is false, we don't have a triangle. So in this case, my largest side is greater than the sum of my smaller sides, so therefore I don't have a triangle. Okay, there's no triangle there. All right, so let's go ahead, take a moment, and try the rest of these. All right, so after solving some of these, for number 2, we should have gotten a right angle as both of those squared values equal each other. For number 4, we should have received an acute angle. We can see that the sums of the legs, 17 and 17, is a lot greater than the sum of the hypotenuse, so the hypotenuse is smaller. All right, so now let's look at number 5. We should have seen a right angle. Number 6 fails the triangle inequality, so therefore it is not a triangle. Number 7, we should have received an acute angle. And lastly, for number 8, considering that the hypotenuse, or letter C, is greater than the sides, we have an obtuse angle. All right, so hopefully all of that made sense, and we will continue to practice this.